Welcome to Willow Road Church. I'm Pastor Ryan, and today we're going to continue our walk through Ephesians, and we're going to start with Ephesians chapter 6, verses 10 through 13. And today what we're going to do is we are going to focus on the first of three parts of Paul's dramatic finale to his letter. We've been doing this for a couple months now, and it's coming to an end. And Paul does this in spectacular format. The climax of this letter, it's a battle plan. And it's not against the flesh and blood of the world or the governments or pagans or unbelievers. What Paul is going to share with us is counter to 1,500 years of what we've been taught in the church. We have started so many wars against people and places in the name of Christ. And that's not here in the Bible. Paul is going to share with us the exact opposite. And I'm going to share with you a story. Now, we're going to talk about the armor of God today. And this isn't exactly the armor of God, but I want you to hear this story. This elderly woman was walking out to her car, and someone was in the middle of robbing it. They were in the back seat. They were digging down. They were pulling everything out. And she screamed right when she saw him. She screamed out. She goes, "Acts 2:38. Acts 2:38." And the guy froze, and he just sat there in the back of the car, didn't do anything. She called the police. He just sat there. The cop showed up. He looked at the burglar, and he said, "Burglar." Or first he looked at the lady and he said, "What did you do to make him stay still?" She goes, "It was God's word, his scripture." And then he turned to the burglar and he said, "Can I ask you, what made you stay still?" And he said, "Well, I thought she said she had an axe and 238s. Yeah. But that is not the armor of God. All right, So what does Paul say in these messages, in this finale? How does he start? He says, we talked about unity, being united together in marriage, as father and sons, as children, as master and owner. We went through all of these different things of unity, and then Paul just says, finally, be strong in the Lord and in the strength of his might. Put on the full armor of God so that you will be able to stand firm against the schemes of the devil. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the powers, against the world forces of this darkness, against the spiritual forces of wickedness in the heavenly places. So what he is saying here is the battle isn't against people. Many times we like to watch the news and we start to blame people. It's not the people, it's a spiritual battle. And what Paul is going to do is he's going to prepare believers with weapons and tools to win the battle against the evil and the temptations of this fallen world. So right off the bat, I want to tell you what Christianity is not. It is not a call to jihad. It is not a call for the Crusades to run around the world killing people who don't believe the same things that we believe. No, in Matthew chapter 5, verse 9, Jesus tells us, "Blessed are the peacemakers, and to love those who persecute you." Now, this isn't a call not to defend yourself. That's why they have a gun called the peacemaker. It's okay to defend yourself. But it's not okay to be aggressive. That's not what we're supposed to do. We're not supposed to go around and tell people, "Listen, you don't believe what I believe, so off with your head." No, that's Islam. That's not Christianity. Then Paul writes to Timothy in chapter 6, he says that we're supposed to fight the good fight. This is a reference to the spiritual battle, the spiritual fights that we have in the world today against those spiritual rulers. The truth is this. When we go around the world, I've traveled quite a bit. And what I've noticed as I go around the world is they look at Americans and they think that we have it so good. And they say, you don't understand our hardships. You have no idea. Because they're different. I drove through a little town in Jamaica where everything there was made of tin. Little kids running out begging for money. And everybody says, oh, you don't understand the hardships of the world. And I understand where they're coming from. But I also think that they're wrong about America because they're focusing on the material wealth, the food, the clothing, the AC. Yet what they're missing is the real enemy of suffering. With full assurance, I can say this to everybody in this room. I'm sure we have dealt with heartache. I'm sure we in this room, we have dealt with suffering and a loss of a loved one, watching the ones in our life struggle, watching people that we love have to walk through shame because of a mistake. Every person in this room has had to battle against something, and those things hurt deeper spiritually than physical harm or starvation. That's called spiritual suffering. That is the battle against the influence of Satan in this world. I call it being blindsided in life. And none of us are immune. None of us are immune to being blindsided, not even pastors. You'll see on TV probably once a month because the media loves to play up a pastor who makes a mistake. Pastors aren't perfect. They're not immune to being blindsided either. But what is blindsided? What is that? I'll give you an illustration of what that is. If you've ever watched football or you know anything about football, and you know what, I'm going to be real. I always say to pastors who use football references, I'm like, seriously, you're using a football reference? But I'm going to do it today, okay, because it works out. So quarterback goes up to the line. We'll say the pulpit's my center. He gets up there and he's like, down, sit, hook, and he drops back to pass. If anybody here has ever played football or quarterback, I did when I was a little kid, you'll know when you're wearing your helmet, your peripheral vision stops right here. So if you're a right-handed quarterback and you're dropping back to pass, you can't see anything on this side of the field, but you can see everything over here. If someone breaks through that line and comes around that corner and hits you, you look like Eli Manning right here. And here's the thing, it hurts. It knocks the wind out of you. You go black. Some people don't get up. I want to say it was Joe Theismann. I could be wrong, but I think it was Joe Theismann who got blindsided by Lawrence Taylor, and he never played a down of football again. So how do we prevent that in football? In football, you get a left tackle, and he is the second highest paid person on every NFL football team because he is protecting the most expensive player on the team, the quarterback. It's the left tackle. But in life, when we're walking through life and we don't have our guard up or we don't have a left tackle and you're blindsided, it can become shocking. When that happens, sometimes we start, even as Christians, all people, we start making some poor decisions. We start making decisions that can make us suffer incredible suffering because of the natural consequences of our sin. But for some people, when you are blindsided spiritually in life, it can spiritually end your career. And people walk away from the faith. They walk away because they've been hit so hard and knocked down so hard, and they don't know what to do. This can cause people that we love in our life to do things so out of character because of the pain inflicted in their life. Remember in Luke, in the gospel story, when Satan entered Judas, that was spiritual warfare. What did Judas betray Jesus for? For money. He did it for money. And this is the same battle that we, as believers, we have to deal with every day. Think, what's going on here? Is it my mic here or something? All right, we're good. I think it just wasn't plugged in well. Let's just think for a moment about the people in our life, people that we know that walk through life, they have no problems. Everything is just going great. They don't have any worries, but within a matter of a couple trials, 1 or 2 days of hardship, they're addicted to drugs, or they start lying, and those lies start to roll, and they continue to lie, and the next thing you know, your life is being destroyed. It doesn't take much when you're blindsided. And don't think for one moment that any of those people are any better or worse than you and I. Every single person in this room, I don't care how long you have known the Lord or how good you think you are, it doesn't take much in your life to get blindsided and knocked off a track. But luckily, what does Paul do? Paul, he gives us a roadmap. He gives us a plan of attack to fight this spiritual fight, this fight that we must endure throughout our life. He gives us a blueprint to avoid us from being blindsided. This blueprint, which is this amazing left tackle that will never let anyone in to knock you off your guard. But before we start talking about that, I want us to look back at chapter 2 of Ephesians when Paul said, "And you were dead in your offenses and sins, in which you previously walked according to the course of this world, according to the prince of the power of the air, of the spirit that is now working in the sons of disobedience." And what does he say in verse 6? He says, don't revert back to your old ways. No, he says our struggle is against the evil of this world. This is exactly what Paul wrote. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the powers, against the world forces of this darkness, against the spiritual forces of wickedness in heavenly places. This is him repeating exactly what he said in chapter 2. Exactly what you were that you no longer are. But look at that word. He says struggle. Remember that you and I, or any believer, one time in our life we didn't believe. One time in our life we walked in darkness. But once you experience Christ, once you experience the grace of Christ, something happens in your life. Christ dwells inside of you. And I can tell you right now, he is more powerful than any darkness you will ever face in this life. But notice that Paul doesn't sway away from the darkness. He says, there's an operative word in that passage, the struggle. Because the struggle is real. It's a real struggle. Paul says, therefore, since the struggle is real, the next word is, therefore, take up the full armor of God so that you will be able to resist on the evil day and have done everything to stand firm. The truth is this, Christ will complete his work in you. He will. But Paul is giving us a recipe to confront evil. And we do this by what? Putting on the full armor of God. See, there's some people in the world, they don't take the idea of Satan and his influence on the world seriously. They just don't. And Paul is warning us that this is real, and it's a fight you must be ready to fight. Because if you're not ready for it, you're going to be in trouble when it hits you. But then there are some who are they are dangerously obsessed with spiritual warfare and far too scared of Satan. I heard a pastor once, he started his prayer and he said this. This is how he started his prayer. He said, "Let us bow our heads." And the first thing he said was, "Satan, leave this place of worship." I was like, bro, seriously? Before you mentioned Jesus, God the Father, or the Spirit, you prayed to Satan to leave this place? Let me tell you right now, Christ does not fight Satan with your words. He doesn't do it by sprinkling oils on things or screaming to Satan to leave the building. No, Christ, he operates and he destroys every enemy through the gospel of grace. This was important to Ephesians, and here's why. Because in their culture, in that pagan culture, they had more fear of the demonic than the righteous. And Paul is saying, don't have fear of Satan. Satan needs to fear Christ. And Christ has equipped you with every single thing that you need to be victorious. Let's pause for a moment. What does this tell us? What does it tell us when he says it's against the heavenly realm, not flesh and blood? Man, this is when you see grace on every single page of the Bible. When you see someone in sin, or if you see someone in your life who is sinning against you, I want you to remember something about that person. It's not them. They were made in the image of God. They were made to be a way to work for the Lord. When you look at them and they are sinning against you, or they're just sinning and their life is being destroyed, it's the dark influence of Satan that is doing it, not the human being. It's the influence of the fall, of the sin in this world. Now, I want to be clear, okay? If someone goes out and murders their family and walks into court and says, "Satan made me do it," that ain't no excuse. All right? What I'm doing is I'm saying, what Paul is about to do is he's going to protect you with this. When you find yourself in this moment, what do you do when you find the darkness and evil in the world? He says, put on the full armor of God. He doesn't say to put on one piece or two pieces. You can have faith, but be not having truth, and guess what? Find yourself in darkness. He says, put on the full armor of God. In Ephesians 6:1, he said, be strong. Be strong, which literally means in the Greek to be strengthened. Saying be strong in the Lord is equivalent to this. It's saying be strengthened in the mighty and the glorious power of the Lord. His resurrection power, that Spirit, it flows through every single believer. Christ's presence is with you. He's in you, and he will never leave you. We look in the Old Testament in Joshua in verses 1-6. What happens is he goes, when Yahweh, this is what he said to Joshua. He said, be strong and courageous. He said that to them before they entered battle against the pagans. He said, I'm going to go out before you. And think about Joshua for a second. Joshua has seen so many amazing things by Yahweh that when he goes out, he has full assurance and trust that God's going to protect him. It's incredible. Man, but we really missed something. Because today, the battle is no longer against flesh and blood. We must be courageous when we head into battle. But here's the difference. We know this. Yahweh is not out in front of us. He's inside of you. You cannot lose a spiritual battle when He's in you fighting on your behalf. Our battleground of spiritual warfare is everyday life. And the influence of Satan will try to stir up doubts in your mind. He'll try to corrupt the church. He'll undermine our confidence in the gospel, the same gospel that unites us all. And our goal is this: to survive, to hold our ground, to stand firm together in gospel convictions. Now, I'm here to tell you today, if you feel hopeless, if you feel a struggle with evil in your life, if you face regret, or if you've just given up, you said, you know what, I'm not going to fight this fight anymore, I've lost. I'm about to sound like a Batman episode. You know, same bat time, same bat channel next week. But here's the truth. Next week, we're going to talk about how to put on the full armor of God, how to use it in this fight, how to struggle yet win the spiritual battle against the rulers of this world and his dark forces. And hint, here's a hint. It literally has nothing to do with your virtuous actions. Zero. It has nothing to do with what you can bring with your spiritual gifts to the Lord. Has zero to do with that. It's a complete understanding of who your champion and your commander is, and it is Jesus of Nazareth.